Have you ever wondered why, in a modern world full of pressure, there are still women who stand firm in confidence and inner strength? And yet, there are also those who live in quiet insecurity, constantly trying to please others, searching endlessly for happiness in distant places, only to never truly find it. So where does the secret of a confident woman lie? In an inspiring book, a self-improvement course, or a strict self-care routine? But these are not the true answers. Carl Jung, the great psychologist of the 20th century, believed that confidence and happiness in such women do not come from what they try to add to themselves, but from what they have dared to confront and reclaim on their journey toward inner wholeness. All of these truths will be revealed with clarity in today's video. If you, as you are now, feel exhausted from playing roles, if you long to live a life shaped by your own happiness, then this journey is for you. Because at the end of this path, you may discover a version of yourself that is confident and fulfilled in ways you have never imagined before. Number 1. They no longer run from the shadow. There is something many women are never taught. Not everything unpleasant within you needs to be removed. In fact, the very parts that are hidden, suppressed, or deemed unacceptable are quietly shaping your life in ways you may not even notice. A truly happy and confident woman is not someone who is always positive, always composed, or always in control of her emotions. She is someone who has stopped running from the darker corners within herself. The shadow does not come from outside. It is not something foreign. It is the part of you that once was before you learned how to become more acceptable. It is the anger you swallow when you are treated unfairly. The jealousy you quickly deny because you fear appearing small. The need to be seen, to be acknowledged, hidden beneath the mask of, "I don't need that." Over time, these parts do not disappear. They simply retreat deeper, to a place where you can no longer see them, yet still feel them through sudden reactions, unexplainable emotions, and patterns that repeat themselves again and again. Emily always believed she was not into drama, so she built an image of herself as calm, rational, and unaffected by emotions. In casual relationships, this seemed entirely true. But when she entered closer relationships, she often felt hurt by the smallest things, tended to stay silent and endure, then suddenly erupted in conflicts she herself could not fully understand. After each time, she blamed herself for being too sensitive and tried even harder to control her emotions. What Emily did not realize was that she had never truly allowed herself to feel and name her anger from the beginning. Each time discomfort arose, she dismissed it, thinking it was not worth it, or not who I am. But denied emotions do not disappear. They accumulate and wait for a stronger moment to surface. The problem was not that she was too sensitive, but that her true emotions had never been honestly acknowledged. When she began to recognize them, her reactions gradually became clearer and more manageable, instead of silently building up and exploding. The shadow works in subtle ways. The more it is denied, the more it finds ways to appear. Not to destroy you, but to be seen. Yet when you fail to recognize it as part of yourself, you begin to see it in others. You are irritated by someone's selfishness, not realizing you also long to put yourself first. You judge another's arrogance without seeing your own need for recognition. And so, you become trapped in a loop. The more you deny, the more you are triggered. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is not merely a philosophical warning, but a psychological truth. When you do not face what lies in your shadow, you are not truly in control of your life. You are simply reacting according to patterns formed long ago, from unhealed wounds, from parts of yourself that were never accepted. A truly happy woman is not one without a shadow, but one who is honest enough to look at it without turning away. This transformation does not come in a sudden, radiant moment of awakening. It begins quietly, in pauses that seem insignificant. When instead of blaming circumstances, she slows down and asks why she reacts so strongly. When in the midst of vague discomfort, she does not avoid it, but gently turns inward and listens to what within her has just been touched. These questions are not comfortable, yet within that discomfort, a door quietly opens, bringing her closer to herself. There is a profound difference between becoming better and becoming whole. Many women try to improve themselves by eliminating what they see as negative. They try not to feel anger, not to feel jealousy, not to appear weak. But this is like trying to make a painting more beautiful by erasing its darker tones. The result is not perfection, but a loss of depth. A happy woman does not strive for perfection. She learns to hold everything, both light and shadow. This does not mean surrendering or justifying harmful behavior. On the contrary, when you recognize your shadow, you gain more choice. You can feel anger without hurting others. You can acknowledge jealousy without being controlled by it. You can desire more without feeling guilt, because now you are no longer being driven by unconscious forces. You begin to engage in dialogue with them, and perhaps that is the moment when everything begins to change. Not when the external world becomes easier, but when you are no longer unconsciously led by your inner reactions. When you realize your anger is not an enemy, but a signal. When discomfort is no longer something to suppress, but something to listen to. You no longer react blindly, but begin to understand why you react at all. From there, a quiet form of self-mastery emerges. It is not loud, it does not seek attention, yet it is clear enough for you to know when to pause and when to move forward. The shadow is no longer something that pulls you unconsciously, but something you can see, name, and choose how to respond to. And in that moment, you do not just understand yourself more deeply. You begin to truly reclaim authorship over your own life. But facing the shadow alone is not enough. Even when you begin to see yourself more clearly, there is still another, more subtle layer that keeps you at a distance from who you truly are. Number 2, they break the persona and stop living for acceptance. There are moments when you suddenly realize you have grown used to responding in ways that are appropriate, used to saying what should be said, doing what should be done, to the point that you no longer pause to ask whether any of it is truly you. Everything still flows, still feels right, still earns acceptance. Yet somewhere inside, there is a quiet stillness, as if a part of you is standing outside, observing. And in that subtle moment, if you are attentive enough to notice, you may see that perhaps you have lived in a role for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to simply be yourself. A happy and confident woman is not someone who has never worn a mask. On the contrary, she has lived in it for a long time. She understands what it feels like to become agreeable, so she will not be abandoned, to be good enough to be recognized, to skillfully adjust herself to fit each situation and each person. She knows how to become the version others expect of her: a devoted daughter, a cooperative colleague, a friend who always listens, a proper woman. And precisely because she does this so well, it becomes harder for her to realize that she is slowly disappearing from her own life. The persona is not false in a simple sense. It is more subtle than that. It is a layer formed very early, reinforced each time you were praised for being good, criticized for being difficult, loved for being understanding, and distanced for being too different. Gradually, you do not just learn to wear it. You come to believe that it is who you are. And once that belief takes hold, any inner misalignment is labeled by you as wrong, something to be corrected or concealed. But there is a truth rarely made clear. When you live to be accepted, you also hand over the authority to define who you are to others. Your sense of worth no longer comes from within. It depends on external reactions. A compliment can make you feel whole, yet a single cold glance can make you doubt yourself. This kind of confidence is not stable. It is like standing on still water, where even the slightest ripple can unsettle you. Imagine a woman who is always described as easygoing. She never refuses a request, always maintains a gentle attitude, and avoids all conflict. People like her trust her, and often say that being around her feels comfortable. But few know that each time she says sure, when she actually wants to refuse, a part of her feels betrayed. The feeling is not loud, but it accumulates. And at some point, she no longer knows where her boundaries are, because she has never truly lived by them. The danger of the persona is not that it makes you fake, but that it distances you from your own genuine experience. You begin to live by reflex. What should I say? What should I do? How should I appear to be liked? You become highly adaptable, yet increasingly dishonest with yourself. And the paradox is this: the more you are liked, the more alone you feel, because no one truly knows the person behind the mask. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But to become yourself, you must first recognize that at some point you stopped being yourself. This realization is not comfortable. It is like standing in front of a mirror and seeing a reflection that does not fully belong to you. It is familiar, yet strangely distant. A woman begins to break the persona not by changing the outside world, but through a very small act. She stops automatically agreeing. She begins to pause and listen to her real feelings before responding. At first, it may only be a hesitation, a brief silence before answering. But that pause opens something new. For the first time, she allows herself to choose rather than react. This process is not easy. When you stop pleasing others, you will clearly feel the shift in how they respond. Some will be uncomfortable, some will leave, some will say that you have changed. And in those moments, old fears return. The fear of rejection, the fear of no longer being loved. This is where many people return to their old mask, not because they want to, but because they are not yet steady enough to withstand the feeling of not being accepted. But a woman who truly moves through this stage understands something deeper. Acceptance gained at the cost of losing yourself is not love. It is a compromise. And the longer you compromise, the greater the cost, not externally, but within the quiet fractures inside you. When she begins to preserve even a small part of her authenticity, She is gradually rebuilding a foundation of confidence that does not depend on how others see her. Think of the difference between a tree that is trimmed into a perfect shape and one that grows naturally. The first may appear beautiful to the eye, but it must constantly be controlled and maintained to keep that form. The second may not be perfect, but it grows in its own way, grounded from within. A woman living through her persona is like a trimmed tree. A woman who breaks it begins to grow again according to her true nature. From the perspective of modern psychology, this can be related to the concept of self-congruence, a state in which outward behavior aligns with inner experience. Research shows that people with higher levels of congruence tend to have better mental health, less anxiety, and a stronger sense of meaning in life. In contrast, when a person consistently acts against their true feelings, they are more likely to fall into prolonged inner tension, even if they appear stable on the outside. As the persona is gradually set aside, what emerges is not always immediate confidence, but often a kind of emptiness. You are no longer your old self, yet you do not fully know who you are. This is one of the most disorienting stages, but within that space, something real begins to take shape, not based on expectation, but on direct experience with yourself. And then, as a woman slowly releases the need to be accepted, a subtle shift begins to take place. She no longer reacts based on what others might think, but begins to live from a clearer inner ground. She may no longer be liked in the same way, no longer easy in the familiar sense, but in return, every word she speaks and every choice she makes carries a truth she no longer questions. This freedom is quiet. It does not come from resisting the world, but from no longer needing to adjust herself to fit into it. And when she no longer lives to be accepted, she is no longer easily wounded by rejection. Because now, her value is no longer in the hands of others, but in the way she stands firmly within herself. As the mask is slowly removed, a space appears, and within that space, she begins to relearn how to reconnect with the original source of energy within her. Number 3. They reclaim and nurture their inner feminine energy. There is a common misunderstanding when people speak of femininity. It is often reduced to gentleness, softness, self-sacrifice, and the tendency to always place others first. But when it is confined to that, femininity is no longer a source of strength. It becomes an invisible mold that causes many women to shrink themselves. Truly happy and confident women do not lose their femininity, but neither are they bound by outdated definitions of it. They do something far more subtle. They return to and nurture their original feminine energy while establishing a grounded balance with their own clarity and decisiveness. Deep within every woman, there are always two parallel currents. One is soft, intuitive, feeling and connective. The other is clear, directed, analytical, and action-oriented. When these two currents fall out of balance, life begins to feel unstable. Some lean entirely into emotion and self-sacrifice, easily swept into others, losing their boundaries. Others become overly rigid, constantly controlling, constantly rational, to the point that they lose touch with their own inner experience. True confidence does not lie in either extreme, but in the ability to let both exist without cancelling each other out. Many women have been taught how to love, but not how to remain themselves within love. They know how to care, to give, to understand, yet feel uncertain when it comes to saying no, setting limits, or protecting their own needs. Over time, they become exhausted in the very relationships they once believed would nourish them. This does not come from being too weak, but from the fact that their inner sense of direction was never developed in a healthy way. On the other hand, some women learn to be strong by completely rejecting their softness. They tell themselves they must be entirely independent, must not need anyone, must not be vulnerable. They achieve much and manage their lives well, yet deep inside, there is a distance they cannot quite name when it comes to their own feelings. They are not easily hurt, but neither do they easily feel connected. Over time, this strength becomes a shell rather than a true source of power. Happy women do not choose one side. They learn to listen to both parts within themselves, as if listening to two different rhythms within the same piece of music. They allow themselves to feel deeply without being carried away. They act with clarity without becoming cold. They can love fully without losing themselves in love. They can be alone without feeling empty, because they do not need someone else to complete them. There is a clear image for this. Imagine a river. If there is only water and no banks, it spreads out and loses direction. If there are only banks and no water, it becomes a dry channel. When both exist together, the flow becomes strong, defined, and purposeful. Feminine energy is like the water, fluid, soft, rich with feeling. The rational and directing aspect is like the riverbank, holding the flow so it does not lose its way. When the two are in harmony, a woman is no longer pulled away by emotion, nor trapped in rigid control. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This applies not only to relationships with others, but also to the inner world of each person. When the different parts within you truly meet, no longer denying or overpowering each other, a transformation occurs. You are no longer living as one half trying to compensate for the other. You become whole. A simple yet profound example can be seen in how a woman makes decisions. When disconnected from her feminine energy, she may choose purely based on logic, on what she should do, on what seems reasonable. Yet afterward, she feels an emptiness, as if something is not quite right. On the other hand, if she relies only on fleeting emotion, she may be pulled into unstable decisions she later regrets. But when both aspects are integrated, something shifts. She recognizes choices that are both logically sound and deeply right in a way that requires no explanation. Women like this often carry a quiet, distinct presence, not because they try to impress, but because they are fully present within themselves. They do not need to speak excessively to prove their worth. Their confidence is not loud, but it is unmistakable. It shows in the way they look, the way they listen, the way they move through life without hurry or strain. What matters is that this balance does not appear on its own. It comes through a very real process, one that is not always comfortable. It begins when a woman realizes she has lived too long in one extreme and starts to relearn how to trust the other. When she allows herself to be soft without seeing it as weakness. When she allows herself to be strong without fearing she is no longer feminine. When she stops asking what others will think and begins asking what feels true for her. Then a subtle shift takes place. She no longer seeks balance from the outside, from someone who will complete her. She no longer needs a strong person to lead her, nor a weaker one to validate her worth. She enters relationships as someone already whole, not to be completed, but to grow alongside another. To nurture feminine energy is not to return to an old mold, but to return to your most natural state, where emotion and reason no longer oppose each other, but support one another. When that happens, confidence is no longer something you force yourself to display. It becomes a quiet, steady feeling within, like a place you can always return to, no matter how the outside world shifts. And yet, to sustain that connection, there is something no one can avoid: moments of stillness, where there is no one left to lean on, only yourself. Number 4, they embrace loneliness as a part of psychological growth. There is a truth many women are never prepared to face. The journey of becoming yourself almost always comes with loneliness. Not the loud kind of loneliness where no one is around, but the quiet feeling of separating from what once felt familiar, safe, and belonging. It is the moment you realize you no longer fit into old conversations, old relationships, even the old version of yourself. And in that silent space, many begin to feel unsettled, rushing back to what is familiar just to avoid being alone. But truly happy and confident women move in a different direction. They do not rush to fill that space. They do not see loneliness as something broken that needs fixing. Instead, they recognize it as a necessary phase of inner growth. Because when you begin to live more truthfully, you no longer fit into connections that were built on who you used to pretend to be. And when those old layers fall away, what remains at first is not new connection, but a deep stillness with yourself. Many people confuse loneliness with abandonment. Abandonment carries a sense of lack, as if you need someone else to complete you. But loneliness, in the context of growth, is different. It is like stepping into a quiet room after years of constant noise. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable, even unsettling. But if you do not rush to break it, you begin to hear what was once drowned out. Your real thoughts, your real emotions, the questions you once avoided. A woman once shared that after ending a relationship that had lasted for years, what she feared most was not losing the other person, but the evenings with no one to text, no one to share with. In the beginning, she filled the space by constantly going out, meeting friends, and working more. But the busier she became, the more exhausted she felt. Until one day, she chose to stay home alone and do nothing. At first, the silence made her uneasy, but gradually, she realized she had been using other people to avoid facing herself. And for the first time in years, she began to ask what she truly wanted, instead of who others expected her to be. In that way, loneliness is no longer an enemy. It becomes a necessary space for reconnecting with yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." When a woman does not yet understand herself, she can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. But when she begins to listen to and understand her inner world, loneliness no longer carries the same negative meaning. It becomes a choice, a conscious pause, rather than a fear. What matters is this: only when you can be alone without feeling empty can you enter a relationship without losing yourself. If you need others to fill an inner void, you are more likely to accept unhealthy relationships just to avoid loneliness. But when you become familiar with your own presence, your standards begin to shift. You no longer choose someone simply because they are there. but because they truly align with who you are becoming. Loneliness is also where uncomfortable truths begin to surface. Without distraction, you start to see the repeating patterns in your life. Why are you drawn to the same kinds of people? Why is it hard to say no? Why you often feel not enough? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. Without the space to reflect, you will continue living the same cycles without realizing it. You can think of this process like letting muddy water settle. When it is constantly stirred, everything remains unclear. But when you stop, even if it seems like nothing is happening at first, the sediment slowly sinks and the water becomes clearer. Clarity does not come from doing more, but from giving yourself enough stillness to see more deeply. Women who embrace loneliness are not closed off or distant. On the contrary, they often have the capacity for very deep connection. But that connection no longer comes from a need to be saved or completed. It comes from intention and awareness. They can love without dependency. They can bond without losing their boundaries. And this is only possible because they have already faced themselves in solitude. Of course, this journey is not comfortable. There will be days when you question your choices, moments when you want to return to what is familiar just to feel safe again. But if you stay with the process, you begin to notice a subtle shift. You are no longer afraid of silence. You no longer rush to seek attention or validation from the outside. You begin to feel whole, even when you are alone. From that foundation, a different kind of confidence emerges. It is not loud, does not need to prove itself, and does not depend on circumstances. It comes from knowing that you can be alone and still be okay, that you do not have to trade yourself away to keep someone in your life. This is a kind of confidence that cannot be taken from you, because it is not built on anything external. In the end, loneliness is no longer something to avoid. It becomes an essential part of growth. It is like a doorway everyone must pass through if they want to truly understand themselves. And happy women are not those who have never felt lonely, but those who have learned to walk through it, sit with it, and turn it into a quiet companion on the path back to themselves. And when a woman goes deep enough through that loneliness, she begins to touch something even deeper, a process where the scattered pieces within her slowly begin to find their rightful place again. Number 5. Happiness and confidence as the result of individuation. Carl Jung never believed that the goal of life was to become the best version of yourself in the way modern society often teaches. He was not concerned with perfection, nor did he encourage forcing oneself into any prescribed moral standard. For Jung, the ultimate aim of psychological and spiritual development was wholeness, not improvement. And the process that leads to that wholeness is called individuation, or more precisely, the journey of returning to oneself. Individuation is not about adding something new. It is about stripping away everything that does not truly belong to you, borrowed beliefs, learned roles, the layers you created just to survive. It is the moment you face your shadow, the parts you once rejected, and begin to hold them as part of life itself. It is when the inner girl, the feminine aspect that was once suppressed, and even the memories that seemed insignificant, begin to be brought into the light of awareness. Individuation does not appear as a burst of radiant light. It is a descent, a movement inward toward the roots, where you face wounds, reconcile with the past, and learn to live with your whole being. Strength and vulnerability, reason and intuition, shadow and light. Only when these parts are integrated do you step out of a divided existence, where you are always trying to become someone, and begin to live a life that is truly authentic, self-directed, and deeply grounded. A woman who went through this journey once shared, "I lived as if I had been wearing a mask for 30 years. I always behaved in ways others expected, always smiled even when I was falling apart inside. But when I began returning to the little girl within me, to the parts I once felt ashamed of, I realized I had not truly lived a single day. And from that moment, I could not go back." The process of individuation is not easy. There will be times when you feel lost, no longer belonging to the old world, yet not fully knowing who you are in the new one. This journey asks for the courage to step into unfamiliar territory, old memories, imposed beliefs, unnamed fears. Jung believed that we cannot truly mature unless we confront the psychological inheritance we carry, the voices in our mind that are not truly ours, but belong to our mother, our grandmother, society, doctrine, borrowed morality. A woman on the path of individuation gradually separates herself from these voices, not to reject them, but to recognize what is truly hers and what is merely an echo of others. And this is the most challenging part: resistance from the outside world. When you change, you force others to confront themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. A woman who begins to say no instead of yes, who creates distance in relationships that once seemed fine, who no longer tries to please everyone. She is not rude. She is not rebelling. She is simply no longer performing. Yet that alone can make others uncomfortable. They ask, "Why have you become so distant? Is something wrong with you? You used to be so much nicer." What they are really saying is, "I am uncomfortable now that you are no longer someone I can control." One woman shared that since childhood, she had always been the emotional anchor of her family, the one who mediated conflicts, who carried the emotional weight for her mother, her siblings, for everyone. But when she became exhausted, she stopped carrying emotions that were not hers. She began to set clear boundaries. She no longer called every day to serve as emotional support for her mother. And the result? She was called selfish, ungrateful, and cold. But deep inside, she knew this was the first time she was truly living as herself, and that, even though it was painful, was freedom. Jung referred to such moments as a confrontation with the self, not to conquer it, but to understand it. No longer divided between an ideal self and a real self, a woman begins to reorganize her entire inner world, her values, beliefs, relationships, boundaries, even the way she moves through life. Each day, she chooses to live with awareness rather than reaction. Each choice becomes a brick in the foundation of a new identity, not one shaped by society, but one built from within. Perhaps you are somewhere along this path. Perhaps you have felt confused, made choices others did not understand, stood between two worlds without knowing where you belong. If you wish, you can share your story. You may discover that in doing so, you help someone else feel less alone. As a woman moves deeper into this journey, she begins to see the world through different eyes. What once seemed fixed, career, marriage, status, can fall away without shaking her. Not because she does not value them, but because she is no longer defined by them. she begins to build a different value system, one where loyalty to herself matters more than loyalty to any role, where she chooses companions not out of need, but because they do not require her to shrink. This freedom is not the impulsive kind that says, "I do whatever I want." It is a quiet freedom, like someone standing in the middle of a desert without fear, because she finally knows who she is. From that place, she becomes unshakable, not because she does not feel pain, but because she no longer runs from it. Individuation marks the end of one way of living, a life shaped by formulas, expectations, and conventional correctness. At the same time, it marks the beginning of something deeply beautiful, your real life, not your mother's life, not an idealized version, but a life you write, chapter by chapter, through conscious choices each day. In the end, the secret of happy and confident women does not lie in becoming better than others, but in no longer abandoning themselves. They stop trying to become a model to be loved. They no longer chase validation from the outside, but return to who they truly are, facing honestly the emotional states they once hid away. Happiness is no longer something to achieve. It becomes a natural state, like breathing, like a heartbeat, like the way they walk through life without doubting themselves. For the first time, they are truly living with everything that arises from within.